let's welcome in the former Bruin, former Leaf, friend of the show, recurring guest, John-Michael Liles, in a different location. Where are you today?
I'm just in a little different spot. I've got a sick kid here downstairs in the guest room, so I figured sitting in the wine cave and listening to her cough nonstop is probably not what you guys were looking for this morning. So I had to adjust on the fly.
And you got the nice fresh fade going, it looks like. What is that, a 1 on the sides? What do you got going over there?
That's a 1 on the sides. I try and keep it tight because if I let it grow, the grays come in real heavy on the sides now. So yeah, it's I've been doing the broadcast for the Avs in the playoffs, the last 2 specifically, 4 and 5, and so yeah, just trying to look.
Did you go down to the Pepsi Center? Or I know it's not called that anymore, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, Ball Arena. So my kids' spring break, because we're in the mountains, falls late. It basically happens when Vail Mountain closes. And so we were in Hawaii for games 1, 2, and 3 for kids' spring break. And so we flew back Saturday morning. I stayed down and worked the Sunday afternoon game at Ball Arena, and then went back down and did in studio for game 5 when they were able to close it out.
Damn, Hawaii straight to the playoffs.
It's a tough life.
Yeah, that is pretty sick. All right, Colby, you're bragging.
Yeah.
What brag are you talking about?
Get your Colorado pick in, get it out of the way.
Listen, we've already talked about that on the show. We don't need to revisit that anymore. But Johnny, you're with this team all year. You're around this Colorado team all year. Are you surprised at this playoff result? Because I feel like all year was the West runs through Colorado, and then a month left in the season, or maybe a little bit more than that, they got a little stale. And, it was the same thing in 2022. They go 2-7-2 or whatever going into playoffs. And everyone's like, it's Winnipeg's year. They can't score against Winnipeg. They can't beat Winnipeg. McKinnon's quiet against Winnipeg. And then, they had one of the more dominating series that we saw in the first round for 2 good teams. There were some other series that were dominant, but not 2 good teams were featured in that series.
Well, yeah, it was quite similar to 2022, and that 7-0 loss to Winnipeg there in the last week of the season at home, and really didn't generate a whole lot. Connor Hellebuyck looked fantastic, and Jared Bednar said it. They really kind of took that game and evaluated where they were and where they wanted to be, and I think this team, they've been there. Right. And they understand what it takes to win. And you just, when you have guys like Nathan McKinnon, who's driving that bus, who's pulling the rope, and everybody seems to kind of follow, they know what it takes and what level they need to elevate their games. And that first round series showed it. It was minus game 1. And game 1, listen, they scored some goals and gave up quite a few, but there was an adjustment there after game 1 by Jared Bednar and his staff and the Avs in how they approached the defensive zone specifically. They saw that they could score goals. They were able to generate offense, and Winnipeg's a fantastic team. Connor Hellebuyck's a tremendous goaltender, but they were able to generate offense. And so for the Avs, it was, okay, we have to lock down the defensive zone better. If we're able to do that, we don't give up any crazy odd man rushes. They felt they were going to be able to generate enough offense. And so you could see that. And with the amount of talent and the depth that they have, starting in the defensive zone was key. If they didn't give up a ton of grade A chances and really limited what Alexander Georgiev saw, they felt that they had a great recipe to win. Now, mind you, that may not be every series, but against Winnipeg specifically. And so you see the depth that they got. They were getting, goals from Zach Parise, the fourth line, Trennan, I just look at Lehkonen and Nichushkin.
He had a good series.
7 goals.
Nichushkin's got the Austin Matthews stat line: 7 goals, no
7 goals, no assists. Yeah, exactly. But to me, like guys like that, Nathan McKinnon was kind of quiet.
Yeah.
He still led the team with 9 points, him and Makar. But at the same time, Brantanen didn't score a goal till game 5. That top line, Makar was unbelievable. But that top line was quiet. That Lowry line did a really good job of kind of taking them away. And the Lowry line was -3 in game 5. And Adam Lowry fully admitted that I mean, he's a tremendous player. And that line really did a good job. So I just, to me, it was the depth scoring. They shut down that defensive zone really well. Yes, they still gave up chances. Georgiev reset after game 1. You got to give him a ton of credit because they wanted his head on a stick.
So.
Yeah, they wanted his head on a platter in Denver after game 1.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he comes back. Phenomenal game in game 2 when he arguably could have just shut it down. And I just think that the depth scoring in the end was the kind of determining factor when you look at Lehkonen and Nichushkin. Lehkonen, to me, is the guy you love on your team. The guy is a playoff performer, and he just goes out and does everything well.
Yeah, I mean, he was the guy who, he had the back-to-back conference final clinching goal, right? He did it for Montreal against Vegas and then did it for Colorado against Edmonton in those back-to-back years. He comes up in the clutch. But something I'm curious about too, and Colby and I touched on it a little bit. We haven't really talked about the Oilers yet on today's show and their win last night, but can you touch on it a little bit more, just the difference in the side of the brackets? Like Colorado had to go through Winnipeg, and now they're going to have to go through either Vegas or Dallas. And you look at the other side, Edmonton goes through an LA team that, technically weaker. I know there's not really any weak teams in the NHL. And then they're going to play, a Vancouver team without their number 1 goalie, or a Nashville team that has been, struggling here a little bit. So, do you think that gives a team like Edmonton almost the edge that Colorado has to go through these kinds of teams, or is it just not even a factor?
Well, I think it's definitely a factor, but what I'll say is Colorado, having won a couple years ago, they understand, you got to go through good teams, right? And now you got to go through Vegas or Dallas, and it's going to be a battle. What you hope is that it doesn't, if you get through Vegas or Dallas, that you're not so beat up that you're probably going to face Edmonton, just given how they're playing. And I mean, their power play's 60% right now. People are saying it's the best power play of all time. And,
also being gifted power plays last night was insane.
There's a lot of power plays.
Yeah.
But I think, when you look at it, that Winnipeg series is tough. I think the next series, regardless of who you play, is going to be even tougher. And you just hope that, everybody's hurt in the playoffs, right? But to what degree?
How hurt?
How hurt? Exactly. I look at Florida last year when they got to Vegas, they were so banged up. Yeah, they almost had nothing left, right? And so that's what you're looking at is what is Edmonton next series? Okay, maybe they get through, maybe they don't. But if they get through, how is it 4 games? Is it 5 games? Is it 6 games? How brutal of a series is it versus what Colorado has to go through? If it ends up being Colorado Edmonton in that Western Conference final that we saw a couple years ago, how beat up it would be unbelievable. And I think everybody wants that and would love to see that. And I'm no different. I'd love to see that again. I just think that the skill on display there, and when you factor in what Edmonton's done, the players they've brought in since that. But at the same time, I love the depth that Colorado brought in, at the deadline. When you look at Middlestat, little quiet to start the series, but really played well and gave them, maybe he's not Nazem Kadri, but he gave them that second line center they've been looking for since Kadri left. Right. And so they need that. They have to have that second line going to offset everybody focusing on the McKinnon line. So to me, it's what do those next round series look like? And when those teams get to the Western Conference final, how beat up are they? And then whoever gets to the Stanley Cup final, does Florida run the table? They look so good right now.
I don't see how anybody's going to slow them down in the East. And that's one of the main reason we wanted you to come on today, was because you were a Leaf, you were a Bruin, and that's obviously the big ticket tonight. But before we go to that, I want to ask you this, because you played with Rob Blake, didn't you? If I'm not mistaken. I think you guys are pretty tight, aren't you?
Yeah, good buddy. I don't talk to him regularly. He's in LA doing his thing. But when we see each other, we catch up and chat. And, he was my D partner for 3 years when I came into the league, and, somebody that I looked up to, and just a huge, I owe him so much for my career, just with you give the puck to Blakey, it's going to the right place, right? And so yeah, I mean, we were talking about him the other night in the studio. It's kind of funny. We were talking about just a shot, but it was a puck was on edge. And I was like, yeah, Rob Blake used to tell me to pass him the puck rolling because he would try and stop it on edge and then take a slap shot. And he's like,
knuckle puck.
Well, it was a knuckle puck, but it was a 95-mile-an-hour knuckle puck. And he's like, if I don't know where it's going, the goalie doesn't know where it's going. And he would score like 7 a year on knuckle pucks.
His shot was just so heavy. I mean, you could just see on TV how heavy it was. But the reason that I bring him up is he hired John Stevens. He hired Willie Desjardins. He hired Todd McClellan. Is he getting another head coach to hire, or like you get into these situations now where Luc Robitaille is the president, Rob Blake is the GM, former teammates, right? I assume there's some sort of working relationship there, and I just start to wonder, you know, how many guys do you get to hire? I feel like you normally these GMs get 2 coaches, and I'm just like, I wonder what the future is there, because the heat about Pierre-Luc Dubois is high. You know, rumor has it they tried to bring in Linus Ullmark, which would have obviously been very, if he doesn't, you know, squash that trade, then that changes the LA Kings outlook. Although I don't think I don't think goaltending was the problem for them, especially the last 2 games.
I don't think so either. It changes the LA Kings outlook, but it also changed the Boston Bruins outlook too, right? Yeah. Like there's a piece going back the other way. There's something going back the other way. Which
we don't know what it is.
We don't know what it is. But I mean, listen, Boston had an unbelievable year and they've looked good for most part of this series. But what was that piece going back the other way? Was it somebody else, you know, forward something? I agree with you. I don't know what the future holds for Blakey in LA. Yeah. I mean, he's
like, I got to think that's getting hot. That seat's going to get hot though. And you look, I've heard he's a good, you know, I've never heard guys say bad things about him. Like I know you've talked about him before and you've always said that. So you don't root for that kind of thing, but it's a reasonable question to ask. And it'd be irresponsible not to ask, because you just 100%. Only get so many hires.
100%. And you know, at some point, there's going to be a lot of questions. And my youngest is awake.
Hi.
Say hi.
Are you enjoying your spring break?
Did you have fun in Hawaii? Yeah.
Right.
Monday morning, it was raining here, and she goes, "See, this is why I didn't want to come back from Hawaii, because of this weather." So, no, it is. I mean, it's a reasonable question to ask, and I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of that. And now the noise has picked up around Pierre-Luc Dubois, right? That trade was a huge trade, and now not only has it happened in one place, but now it's happened in a second place, and I mean, it's true colors. Right?
Maybe 3 places.
I mean, isn't it 3? Yeah, I was gonna say.
Exactly 3. Yeah. So, but you know what I'm saying? He went from one place to another, and everybody's like, oh, we'll fix it, right? And then no, they didn't fix it. So then they're gonna take him to another place, and now the noise is out there. Everybody talks about it. I mean, you go through Twitter and you look at Edmonton, LA last night, and half the tweets are, I didn't even know Pierre-Luc Dubois was in this game. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And that's, you know, like, I'm not tweeting that, but I'm saying that's what I saw on Twitter.
Those are the tweets you're liking.
Well, yeah, but that's, I mean, now the noise is out there and everybody is focused on that. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's reasonable that at some point somebody's going, you know, they're going to have that conversation. Okay. What's the last hire? Was this the last hire? Or is the next one the last hire? Right?
I mean, look,
you only have so many of those cards you can lay down.
He's gotten more than most. The way it's gone in the NHL as of late, with how quick everybody is to fire everybody these days. You know, Rob Blake has certainly gotten more opportunities than most have, and so you know, I just wanted to get your perspective. You work out in the West, you live out in the West, you've played with a lot of these guys. Now you're some of the generation, like you said, like your D partners and teammates are all running. Joe Sakic's another one, you know, these guys are your teammates are all running teams now all over the NHL. So I guess if you wanted a coaching job, I think that would probably be pretty easy for you to get. But let's talk Boston, Toronto, because you know this series like, you know, few do, you know, the ins and the outs. You've literally been a part of a 3-1 lead for the Boston Bruins, even though I believe you were a Maple Leaf at that time, correct?
I was a Maple Leaf. I was a Maple Leaf at that time. We were up 4-1 in Game 7 at TD Garden in the third period.
Yeah. So what do you make of this series? Like what can we expect here over the next, will there be a couple of games? Will there be one more game? I mean, there's so many questions that we will find out about over the next couple of days. And then whatever happens, one of these two organizations, a grenade is going off and a lot of things are changing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think if either, whichever team loses in this series, you're correct. There's a grenade that's going to go off. Keefe made the playoffs, I think 5 years in a row since he's taken over, and one series victory, especially with those big four. And that to me is kind of the one thing they haven't changed in Toronto. Like you've got Matthews, Marner, Riley and Nylander, and that's the one thing they haven't touched, right? They haven't, they've tried to revamp their D. They've brought in different goaltenders. It's like Toronto is not an easy place to play. It is
6 home losses in a row, Johnny.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, I mean, like there's going to be it's just a circus, right? Like the first day that I was in Toronto for training camp, it was they opened the doors and the media came in, and I honestly thought like a barricade had broken or something. Like that like fans were coming.
Fans got in.
Yeah, it was like there was 100 and some odd media members coming in. You're coming from Colorado, and like nothing against Colorado, but it was like training camp was like 20 media members, maybe, right? And so that's just what you deal with on a daily basis. Now add in playoffs, now add in, the amount of pressure that's falling on, Austin Matthews, leaves game 4, doesn't play game 5, right? Like you can't make this stuff up.
Optics are so bad.
Well, it's like
so bad. The optics.
Yeah, like Nylander doesn't play for 3 games. And so it's just like, it's like a built-in soap opera for Toronto, right? And you cannot make this stuff up, but yet they find a way to, they played unbelievable in game 5.
Joe Wall was great.
Well. Yeah.
Joe Wall was great.
Wall was great, and Boston did not play well. So now all of a sudden that cranks up the pressure on Boston because they lose the 3-1 lead last year to Florida. And Monty coached at DU. Like I know Monty really well. Unbelievable guy, unbelievable coach. I know so many of the guys on that Boston team still. Like I finished, this is 7 years that I've been retired, and there's still, Carlo, Marshy, Pasta, all those guys were there when I was there. So I definitely, I'm rooting for them because they're such great guys. And knowing
Reamer
Monty,
and Chatty, those are your friends.
Reamer and Chatty, exactly, right? Like, it's the hockey world is small, and I played with all those guys at some point or another. And so, but yeah, like the pressure, I don't know that you could write or a script where there's more pressure on both teams at one point. And that to me is the kind of thing that stands out the most. And Boston, they're up 3-2. So it's not like they're, I think going back to Boston for a game 7, I mean, in the end, it's like you're rewriting 2013 all over again for Toronto, and you're rewriting 2023 all over again for Boston. So
neither scenarios are great, right?
No, it's honestly like I'm just happy to be retired at this point and not a part of that whole thing.
I'm happy you brought that up though, because I was trying to formulate a question asking you like which team has more to lose tonight, and obviously, objectively, it's the Leafs, right? Because if they lose tonight, their season's over. Yeah. But if you are Boston, like that blowing the 3-1 lead last year and then having that happen again this year, to me, is kind of being undersold, right? Like that is a big deal. And then on the flip side, Colby and I talked about it, I think, before game 5. And if you're Toronto, part of this also feels a little bit like 2018 Washington Capitals vibes. Like Ovechkin and that group, there was always that thing standing in the way. They couldn't get out of the second round, right? That was the thing. It took them like 10 years to figure out a way to win. They exercised that Pittsburgh Penguin demon and go on to do it. If Toronto comes back and wins this series, with the amount of shit they got from Boston over the past decade, does it start to feel like this can finally happen? And then again, I've heard every Toronto media show talk about how the energy in the building tonight is going to be belief, right? We can do it. We can come back. But to me, it's going to feel more like nervous energy. Like, oh my God, they're going to fucking do it to us again,
Well, listen, what I'll say is I think Toronto can play a little bit looser tonight. You're going to have the home crowd behind you. And I just remember going back to 2013, we were down 3-1 going to Boston, won that game, came back, won game 6, should have won game 7, but Boston, Bergie and those guys, they're unbelievable players. And unfortunately we didn't, but it was like you went back for game 6 and all of a sudden you had won game 5 in Boston. And you go back to Toronto and it was like, all right, like we're going home. We've got a good feeling. And like, it's that first 10 minutes, you feed off the crowd's energy and you have the fans behind you because they lost the last 2 in Toronto.
Yeah.
And they walked out of there after game 4 and the fans were essentially booing them. Right. So I think to me, like Toronto definitely has a little bit more, looser feel tonight going into game 6. Now, mind you, if Boston puts one in early, then that changes really quickly. But yeah, I agree with you, the Washington Capitals vibes, but if they beat Boston, Florida's sitting there waiting for them. Right. Yeah. And so, to me, Florida they've been kind of the favorite in my mind since day one of the season, given where they went last year and what they, their depth, they're mean, they can skate, they're skilled, like they're scary to me. And Bob's playing out of his mind. Right. So okay, you get past Boston, you exercise the demons, but then Florida's waiting for you. Right.
Yeah,
so
it's not going to go well for whoever wins this series. I have to self-admittedly, I drank the Kool-Aid on how well Tampa played the last month of the season and how lackluster Florida played. I made that mistake with them. I didn't make it with Colorado because I was like, no, Colorado's going to win. But I did make that with Tampa. I feel like an idiot. I picked Tampa to win the series. I really did. I thought that Vasilevsky was going to dial in, and I thought he was Mr. Playoffs. And I'm like, there's no way Bob has this 2 years in a row. And I honestly, I can't believe I picked against Florida because again, 3 months ago, Florida was here and everybody else was chasing them in the entire league. It wasn't even that close.
It's true. And I thought that it was going to be a closer series. Now, mind you, early on, I think it could have gone either way. I just think about the Bob save, the spinorama on Dumba. Like that, to me, if that goes in, I think that changes the entire series.
It's 3-2 in that game instead of 2-2. And then now all of a sudden, Florida's got to play from behind, which they barely did in the series.
They barely did. Exactly. So, yeah, to me, I think it was closer than the 4-1 series score. But, yeah, I don't know. Florida they just look good, and they're getting guys back. They're going to get guys back. Sam Bennett, Lomberg, guys like that, get the depth guys that can.
Those
provide
guys win you play. Those guys win you playoff series. They do.
We say it every broadcast, and somebody, I forget who said this to me. It might have been Dan Heino, but like your first and second liners get you to the playoffs. If they hold serve in the playoffs, you're good. As long as your third and fourth liners can provide some scoring, because third and fourth liners win you playoff series. First and second liners get you to the playoffs. Third and fourth liners win you playoff series.
Look at that Florida Tampa series. That was the difference. You've got the fourth line when they bring Okposo into the lineup in that in game, what was it, 3? Yeah. And Oppo and was it Lorette? They get 2 goals that game. And I even said to Jonny, I've said it on the show, if you get 2 goals from your bottom 6, you'll win every game in the playoffs because your top 2 lines are going to get you a goal. Your power play is going to get you a goal, and 4 is enough to win anytime you get into the playoffs. So, and that's been a big problem for Toronto. Even the other night, they win the game. Well, yeah, exactly.
Winnipeg's. You had Connor and you had Scheifele that scored, but their next 5 or 6 goal scorers, I don't think had a goal in the series. when you look at Perfetti, you look at Niederreiter, you look at Appleton. I mean, I had it written down, but like that to me, I mean, because then you put McKinnon and you put Rantanen. Rantanen didn't score till game 5, but then you add in 5 goals from Lehkonen and 7 goals from Nichushkin. Yeah. I mean, that ends up being the difference in the series.
Yeah. Even like Iafallo and Velarde didn't chip in.
Chip in. I mean, Toffoli had a couple.
But he was quiet a lot of the games.
He was quiet.
He was
Monahan 0, exactly. Ehlers 0.
Norris seemed to play well. Like he seemed to provide and make plays, but it wasn't enough. They didn't get enough, and they didn't get the goaltending. And so goaltending has just been a big this year. I feel like more than other years, there's so many teams that have been, tandems, or we're going to use both goalies. Yeah. LA did it. Even Brossoit came in at one point in that series. Yeah. Let's stay on Boston, Toronto, because I think the big question right now, and Monty made lineup changes after they won 2 in a row. He took Shaddy out. He put Grizz in. Okay. He took Beecher out, and I think he brought the big rig back in, right? Yeah. Who sat down for a couple of games, and it didn't work. Okay. Yeah. And these guys, when it works, they're heroes. When it doesn't, we shred them. I think Forbert comes back into the lineup. I don't think that's been confirmed, but I think he comes back in tonight. Yeah. I think probably for Mason Lohrei, and I think Grizz comes out and Shaddy goes back in as well. But what do you do in goal? Because I think it's Swayman's net. I think no matter what, it's his net. Even if he loses, I think you still have to go back to him in game 7.
If he loses tonight, they go to Omar in game 7.
I mean, I think you set the precedent in the regular season where you alternated, right? Then there were all these questions after Swayman played well in game 1, and then they lose game 2 with Ullmark, and then you go back to Swayman multiple games in a row. You have to stick with Swayman at this point, and he played well in game 5. Yeah, he played really well.
He hasn't let up more than 2 goals.
Yeah, he played he was making unbelievable saves, and you can't that overtime goal. There's nothing he can do. It bounces off a skate and goes backdoor to Nyes. So to me, I think you have to run with Swayman. So I looked at it. I go back to the Avs in 2022. Darcy Kemper had a tough game, and it might have been during the finals. And everybody's like, "Oh, you got to put in Francouz," because Darcy Kemper had the eye injury. Francouz played for
Oh, that's right. He had
5-6 games
between the mask, right?
Yeah, Johansson stick through the mask. So Kemper had a tough game. Everybody's like, you have to go to Francouz. And I said, no, you have to go back to Kemper, because if you go to Francouz and Francouz doesn't play well, Kemper's coming in with his mind off, right? But if you go to Kemper and he doesn't play well, Francouz has been the backup for the majority of the year. He's already in the mindset that he's ready if the starting goalie doesn't play well. So to me, I think you have to run with Swayman at this point, because you have to keep feeding him those starts because he's played well. Yeah. I don't think you just because you lose a game in overtime that your team didn't play all that well, I don't think you can switch it up.
They were bad. They were just bad. They were bad. The turnovers
in the first period.
I haven't seen the Bruins turn the puck over like that. And look, I watch Boston as much as I watch anybody because of my friends that play there. Yeah. And they do not generally turn pucks over like that. And I'm talking.
Marshy was losing puck battles, and that never happens. Pasta, exactly. Those guys don't lose puck battles. They always come out with the puck. And I was watching it because we were in studio for the Avs game, so that was on before us. And I was watching it, and I was like, this is not a good sign. Like the whole first period, Marshy lost every puck battle, and that guy does not lose puck battles in practice.
His stick is so good.
Yeah,
so heavy.
Yeah, so
People don't realize how heavy Marshy is in a stick battle. I mean, he's one of the strongest guys. Yeah. He uses a little bit of a longer stick. Yeah. And so he really can kind of lean that lower hand down. And he's so good at his wrist strength must be really good because he's so heavy in those little stick battles.
I think I won 2 puck battles against him in my last year with Boston, the entire season in practice. And both times I celebrated like I scored a goal. It was, but he does the same thing to you, right? And it's just that's him and Bergie practice as hard as they play, sometimes harder, and it elevates every guy on that team because of it.
I just want to say one last thing on Swayman. and maybe this is me being dramatic, which I tend to do from time to time, but does this playoff performance give Swayman an edge when you talk about the U.S. starting goaltender in the Olympics and Four Nations over Hellebuck with how both guys have played?
Well, so it's interesting you say that.
Right?
So we went through Ryan Miller is a good buddy of mine. He was out here over New Year's with his family skiing, and they stayed with us. And he's done some stuff with USA Hockey, and so part of it is he has to kind of keep in the back of his mind who, he watches the goalies basically. And now he works for San Jose, but over the last year and a half, yeah. And so
that makes sense because Greer and him were teammates in Buffalo, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Greersy brought in a bunch of the Buffalo guys. I think Vanek works there now too, and there's a few other ones. But Millsy, we've talked about this. The U.S. starting goaltenders. So you have Hellebuck, who did not have a good series. Swayman now.
Demko.
I think Demko exactly, and Andre, right? Mm-hmm. So now all of a sudden that's to me that is where the U.S. has kind of separated themselves from Canada.
Vic just goes and Joel.
There you go. All options are on the table. But to me, I think Swayman has elevated his game in the last couple of years. And everybody that I've talked to in Boston, unbelievable guy. I think the guys love him. They play for him. And so, he's inserted himself in that conversation. I mean, do you carry 4 goaltenders, right? I don't know. They've got, that's going to be a really, really tough decision.
5, Johnny, 5. Don't take away from Joel.
There you go. Yeah.
And then, and I know, and I'm projecting out a little bit, but and then you've got Fowler at Boston College, who looks like he's going to be a star NHL goaltender. And I know that
that's early though. That's early.
I know. And I'm not saying for this Olympics, but I'm saying if we're getting back into this every 2-year rotation of international hockey that we're all hoping for, they just have this embarrassment of riches in goaltending right now, coming up through the U.S. hockey development model. So I've got one more question on this Boston Toronto series, and then I do want to pick your brain a little bit about quickly before we let you go with the Rod Brind'Amour Hurricane situation, because that's another organization that you've been around and you probably know. And I know you weren't necessarily there during the glory days of the Carolina Hurricanes.
It's lean years.
but let me ask you, if you have to predict this series, this Boston-Toronto series, what do you see happening here? Do you think Toronto can push this to 7? Do you think Boston gets it done tonight? I mean, I think everybody wants 7. I want 7.
I think everybody wants 7.
League wants 7 for sure.
Yeah, the league wants 7 for sure. I mean, you couldn't script. I mean, 11 years later, it's eerily similar if they get to 7 to what, we went through 2013. I would have a tough time putting money on Boston to lose 3 in a row, is what I would say. I don't know that they get it done tonight, but for me, I just feel like that team and the leaders that they have on that team, I just don't know that Marshy would accept losing 3 in a row. And knowing him as well as I do, I think they get it done and they're able to get, you almost call it escape right now, right? You don't get it done in game 5. You have to go back to Toronto in game 6. I think Boston gets out of it, but I wouldn't put money on Boston losing 3 in a row. That's what I'll say.
Mm-hmm. But you'll put money on the Leafs tonight.
It's possible. I got to look at a few things.
It's not game 7.
We're asking him to pick between his kids right now.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Original 6s. On his the end your eras tour, Johnny. When you're in the twilight years of the career, your eras tour.
Yeah,
so let's just hit this Carolina thing really quickly because I feel like it started to really make the rounds on social media really yesterday when that came out. I think somebody tweeted, one of the insiders wrote that there was a contract offer that was pulled, and that it's pulled because Brind'Amour was like, this is miles apart from what I was hoping for. And we know the owner in Carolina has a tendency to not want to pay people. Yep. What's going to happen here with the Rod Brind'Amour thing? Because you would have thought he'd be a Kane for life. You would have kind of thought that's what the situation would be.
Yeah, I would have thought so.
Colby and I said he was unfireable, Johnny. Like,
Man, that's a tough one. I mean,
with his legacy there.
Yeah, listen, Roddy is an unbelievable guy. He's a Michigan State guy. He was an assistant coach in Carolina when I was there. He is the Carolina Hurricanes. But we all know the owner there, and I mean, you look at like John Forsland, who was the staple of Carolina broadcasting.
I brought this up 2 days ago, Johnny.
The contract negotiations were that far apart.
Yeah.
And he went to Seattle. Yep. Ron Francis is in Seattle. Yep. Right? Like to me, Hackstall's gone. And Ronnie and Rod have a relationship, and
they got big
Seattle
money ownership.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There you go. Big money and ownership, right?
Big money ownership in Seattle.
I was talking about this in studio a couple of nights ago with Kiefer, and Johnny Mitchell was in there with me, and I was talking about this. I was like, it wouldn't shock me. Now, what I could see happening is whenever everything's said and done, Carolina and Roddy are obviously not on the same page. I could see the Carolina owner basically out of pride more than anything matching whatever offers out there if Seattle is the team that's offering.
Even if it's like $7 million a year, something.
But for a top end coach in the NHL, $6 million is not out of the question. Like $7 million to me. I mean, Babs was making $56 million with 100 hours on the jet every year and a suite at every sporting event. The guy that I went to school with at Michigan State was one of the guys that helped negotiate that contract. Like it was, I don't know all the perks. I just know there was a ton of perks besides the salary. So why is $7 million out of the question? Now, to me, it would be more of a pride thing and like a finger to everybody. Like, oh, everybody calls me cheap. Well, I'll match it. But at the same time, if the disrespect level is there initially, that they're so far apart, Rod doesn't want to leave Carolina.
No,
right? Like not at all.
It's obvious. It's obvious.
At the same time, there's pride on both sides too. And if it's a big kind of FU initially, sometimes that's too much to get over. And so. That Seattle has big money. They want to win. And right now they have a head coach opening, and Ronnie Francis is there, and he knows how to build it.
Yeah. Also, and I think, Johnny, every team with an open coaching vacancy is going to be willing to pay him $6 million a year and give him 5 or 6 year deal, because you just don't get many guys like him who are as consistently good, as consistently well-respected. You'll never hear a leak to the media that players had anything negative to say about Rod Brind'Amour. Even Tony D, who has been out of the lineup all year, won't say a bad word about Rod Brind'Amour. Now, might have some thoughts about the GM and the owner, but won't utter a bad word about the guy who won't barely put him in the lineup, because that's just it's Rod. That's his aura.
Well, Colby,
it's his aura. It's who he is. He's a guy, like he says it like it is, right? And he talks to you like I've had a lot of coaches in the league. Not everybody talks to you like a human being. And so Roddy's like, I only had him as an assistant. I never had him as a head coach. But to me, like he's that, like you want to play for a guy like that, right? You just want to.
And just a comment in the chat from Matt Bugno. He said, would players follow him if he got a job in Seattle? And I know 100%. It's tough with contracts and stuff, but Carolina is a team with a couple of UFAs coming up this year too. And, that could be something where, you see that happen a lot in college where, a coach will have his commits and he'll go to another school and they bring the commits with them. Yeah. But you don't often see that happen in the NHL. Maybe like the first time that would really kind of happen.
Yeah, I can see it happening. I just look at some of the guys that have thrived under Brind'Amour. Martinook is a big UFA. One. Like, UFA, exactly. And, Roddy Brind'Amour's looking at the lineup in Seattle. Like, you could probably add a couple of pieces there, but you've got guys like, Tanev there, right? You've got guys like Gord, right? Like you don't think that guy's going to thrive under a guy like Rod Brind'Amour, right? And you bring in like a Martinook and I just think that if that were to happen, guys would follow him, right? Yeah. Especially if it's, depending on who it is. He's just he's a guy you want to play for. And I'd say that just having had him as an assistant coach.
Mm-hmm. I agree. That's all I really got for Johnny today. Colby, you got any final thoughts?
No, look, we appreciate you coming on. I think everybody's watching Bruins Leafs tonight. I think you've got everybody who lives in Toronto hoping for one outcome, and then the entire rest of the league hoping for a different outcome. And it'll be really interesting if Austin Matthews is back in the lineup. I've said over the last couple of days, I think Toronto is doing a major disservice to their players by not telling people what's going on, because the optics are so bad. This is not a normal situation in a normal market where we're hiding injuries. You are making your $13 million a year player look like he doesn't give a shit by not telling people. And I'm sure he cares. Like, I'm sure he does. But like, that's what you're making it look like to the outside world by not telling us.
Well, and he's a guy that doesn't get a lot of flack. He scored 69 goals this year. Like, he doesn't get a lot of that like media intensity like Marner gets or Nylander gets. And if you don't, to me, all of a sudden this opens the door. If he doesn't play tonight and they lose, now all of a sudden stuff starts to refocus towards Austin Matthews. Mm-hmm. Right. And it opens this door of like, okay, he's not immune to scrutiny. And thus far, I would say he kind of has been.
Well, because he scores.
Because he scores. Exactly.
Goals.
I mean, Marner puts up.
It's hard, but it's so hard to, how could you shit on a guy?
No, I agree with you, but I think this is one of those things where it almost is like, okay, this is the tipping point where now the scrutiny really picks up.
Yeah. Well, what about this?
Because they're gonna have to get rid of Shanahan. There's no way he survives a loss. Keefe, we already know, is a dead man walking, and so that
Shanny. It wouldn't shock me if he's still around. That guy just finds a way.
What if Matthews doesn't play?
How many high? I mean, I would. It sounds like he's the one who really makes the decisions around there. Yeah. So it's not like you can say someone else signed these big contracts or signed off on these contracts or the build of the team. If he survives this, then bless his heart. I mean, look, good for him.
It's a 20-year Shanna plan.
Well, what if Matthews doesn't play and they come back and win the series? That's what I'm saying. I'm all for that. I want to hear those narratives.
Yeah, I mean, then I think then you hear less about
Marner trade him.
And right. I mean, like, there's so many scenarios out there that the way this could play out, and
great theater.
It is. Yeah, you can't make you literally cannot write this soap opera.
Yeah, this is NBA shit right here.
All right. Well, look, we hope your daughter feels better, and good luck being dad the rest of spring vacation. So
thanks, guys.
They're keeping you busy, I'm sure.
Yeah, they are. Keep me on my toes.
All right. Enjoy the games tonight. Good luck with the second round. If you're still doing Colorado, I don't know if you guys are still doing some studio work for the second round.
We do pre and post, because everything goes national, but we do pre and post. So I'll be doing pre and post for the Avs, probably, I don't know, 4 out of every series or so.
All right. Thanks for coming on today. I know it's early in Colorado, guys. Johnny. See ya.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Saravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.